You're watching a Formula One race, and every few seconds you hear a pilot's voice crackling over the radio to someone called the race engineer. But here's the thing. While the driver gets all the glory, this person sitting in the garage is making split-second decisions that can mean the difference between victory and disaster. So what exactly is going on in that headset? What does a modern Formula One engineer really decide during a race? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on one of motorsport's most crucial, and honestly, most underrated jobs. The gap between first and second place in Formula One can come down to just a few tenths of a second, and sometimes it all hinges on a single call made by the race engineer. Think about it. The driver is doing their job at the absolute limit, pushing a machine worth millions of pounds through corners at speeds that would terrify most of us. But they can't see everything happening around them. And they definitely can't monitor tire temperatures, fuel loads, and brake balance all at once. That's where the engineer comes in. They're the strategist, the problem solver, and sometimes the difference between a championship-deciding victory and a retirement on lap 47. In Formula One, where margins are measured in milliseconds and a wrong decision can cost millions, the race engineer isn't just supporting the driver. They're fundamentally shaping the outcome of the race. And that's exactly why understanding what they do matters if you want to truly understand how Formula One actually works. So let's find out exactly how much power one person in a headset really has. Imagine you're in a Formula One car doing 200 miles per hour through a high-speed corner, and your tires are starting to lose grip, but you won't feel it until it's almost too late. The driver has maybe a tenth of a second to react, but the engineer, they're watching the data in real time, seeing the tire temperatures climbing, the downforce shifting, the grip levels dropping, all before the driver even realizes there's a problem. Let's break down what's actually happening beneath that cockpit. A modern F1 tire is an incredibly sensitive instrument, not like your road car tire at all. These slicks are designed to work in a very specific temperature window, usually between 80 and 110 degrees Celsius. Too cold, and the rubber is like stone, it won't grip. Too hot, and the compound starts to degrade. The tire loses its structure and begins to blister and chunk away. That window? It's narrow and it shifts constantly, depending on the track, the weather, the fuel load, and how hard the driver is pushing. The engineer is watching 4 separate temperature sensors on each tire, one in each corner of the car, and they're receiving that data every single lap, every single sector. When they say over the radio the front left is 15 degrees hot, they're not guessing. They're reading real numbers. But tire temperature is just the beginning. Think about brake balance, the proportion of braking force sent to the front wheels versus the rear. Get it wrong by just a few percent, and the car becomes either impossible to slow down into a corner or unstable under braking, with the rear sliding out. The engineer decides how to adjust that balance between pit stops. They're also monitoring fuel consumption, predicting how much fuel the driver will need to reach the finish, and calculating whether a 2-stop or 3-stop strategy gives the best chance of victory. And here's where it gets really fascinating. The engineer can't see the track. They can't see other cars. They can't see the weather rolling in. All they have is data, thousands of data points per second, and the driver's voice in their ear describing how the car feels. So they're essentially solving a puzzle using incomplete information, making calls that affect not just lap time, but tire life, fuel strategy, and race position, all while the race is happening at 200 miles per hour. A pit stop adjustment, changing a setting on the car's brake system or suspension, might only gain 1/10 of a second per lap. But over a 58-lap race, that's nearly a minute. And a minute in Formula One is the difference between podium and midfield. The engineer is constantly asking themselves, is the tire still improving, or have we peaked? Do we have enough fuel to push hard, or do we need to manage? Can we beat the car ahead, or should we focus on defending from behind? Should we pit now, while we have track position, or wait another lap and risk losing time? Every single one of those decisions comes down to data interpretation, experience, and split-second judgment. And when you hear the engineer's voice on the radio, calm and focused, giving the driver their next instruction, that's not just communication. That's a strategic masterclass happening in real time with millions of pounds and a championship on the line. To really understand the power of the engineer's role, we need to look at some of the most decisive moments in Formula One history. Moments where the engineer's call changed everything. Take the 2016 Monaco Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes was struggling with tyre degradation in the wet conditions, and his engineer, Peter Bonington, faced a brutal choice: push hard and risk the tyres completely falling apart, or manage and lose track position to the cars behind. Bonington had to read the data, tyre temperatures, wear rates, fuel consumption, and make a call lap by lap. His strategy kept Hamilton in the fight when others were fading, and those tiny adjustments and strategic calls helped secure the victory. Or consider the 2021 Abu Dhabi finale, perhaps the most scrutinized race in modern F1 history. Max Verstappen's engineer, Gianpiero Lambiase, was managing tyre temperatures, fuel levels, and race position in a dynamic situation where everything changed with the safety car. The engineer has to know, when that safety car comes out, do we have the pace to challenge? Are our tyres still in the window? Can we make this fuel last if the race restarts? These aren't guesses, they're calculations based on data, experience, and an intimate understanding of how the car behaves in every condition. Then there's the 2018 German Grand Prix, where Sebastian Vettel crashed in the wet while leading. But look at his teammate Charles Leclerc's engineer managing the Ferrari through that same treacherous track. The engineer has to judge constantly: when can we turn up the engine power without overheating it? When do we have grip, and when is it disappearing beneath us? A tenth of a second of hesitation costs position, but a tenth of a second too much aggression costs a spin. What these moments all have in common is this: the engineer is the voice of cold, calculated rationality whispered into the driver's ear, while everything around them is chaos and speed and pressure. They're not just problem solvers, they're predictors. They're chess players playing a game at 300 kilometers per hour, and the board is constantly shifting beneath them. Now, imagine for a moment that you're that engineer, but without access to live telemetry data. No real-time readouts of tyre temperatures, no fuel consumption curves updating every millisecond, no instant feedback from the car's systems. You'd still have to make the same calls: when to push, when to conserve, when to risk everything on strategy. But you'd be doing it blind, relying only on what the driver tells you through the radio and your intuition built over decades. That's not actually hypothetical. That's how it was in the 1980s and early 1990s. Engineers had to trust their gut and the driver's feedback more than anything else. Today, a modern F1 engineer has access to hundreds of data streams. They can see the degradation of the tyres in real time, predict how long they'll last, optimize fuel consumption to the litre, and model tyre performance across a dozen different scenarios. But here's the thing: that abundance of data can become a cage. It can make you cautious because you can see exactly what you're risking. The engineer has to know when to ignore the data screaming caution and trust that their driver has something extra in them. That's the paradox of modern engineering. The more you know, the harder it becomes to make the leap of faith that winning sometimes demands. So here's what we've learned. An F1 engineer isn't just someone who reads data and makes calls. They're a strategist, a psychologist, and a gambler all rolled into one. They manage tyre degradation. They orchestrate pit stops. They make split-second decisions that can cost millions or win championships. And crucially, they know when the data is everything and when it's nothing. 3 things to remember. Telemetry has transformed the sport, but it's also made risk harder to take. The best engineers combine cold analysis with intuition and driver trust, and ultimately, Engineering wins races, but only alongside a great driver, a great team, and a little bit of luck. Now we want to hear from you. What aspect of F1 would you like us to explore next? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and please subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. Thanks for joining us in the paddock.